And we are good. 3, 2, 1. Here we go. Hello and welcome to the Avanti Entrepreneur Podcast. I am David Bomano, your host, and we are here to help entrepreneurial achievers and business owners and leaders move forward. Today, I have on the show, I'm going to first and foremost call him just a tremendous human being, a really great friend, and a phenomenal 10 out of 10 entrepreneur because he's first of all, he's been really successful, and then sometimes he hasn't. And he's been willing to share and help others along the way. I want to welcome Devin Schain to the show. Welcome.
Thank you, David. It's nice to be here, and I'm glad you clarified the 10 for 10 because I'm going to start with my first lesson. When I was at the University of Pennsylvania, I took entrepreneurial management, and the speaker talked about he really likes management that has scar tissue. And I turned to my friend, I had a little college Mark, and I remember this like yesterday, and I said, this guy's an idiot. I'd much rather have an entrepreneur who's 10 for 10. Well, I've learned my lesson. You're a lot more valuable when you experience some tough times and you gain some scar tissue and dumb tax. So that 10 for 10, you clarified, so thank you.
Yeah, well, I do appreciate it because I think, especially a lot of beginning stage entrepreneurs, they get a little disillusioned because things aren't going well from the start, and they go up and they go down, and a lot of times it's because they see the perfect picture of the successful entrepreneur, right? They may see Elon Musk, or on the cover of a magazine, or they may see the entrepreneur, big house, nice car, beautiful wife, husband, etc. But I always appreciate when the seasoned scar tissued entrepreneur, as you say, is willing to say, hey, I'm still here, but guess what? Behind the curtain, here's what happened along the way, right? And not everybody's willing to get vulnerable, and I do appreciate that, as you know. And you told me before we started that you purchased my book, thank you, but my book, Crash and Learn, and I really got that title because on my podcast I often ask entrepreneurs, what is your crashed and almost burned story? And like you, they usually say, which one do you want, right? And it is called the Entrepreneur Rollercoaster for a reason, right? I mean, we're really high and we think our poop doesn't stink, and then 2 years later, it smells tremendously, right? But for some reason, we stick with it, and it's our drug of choice. So, but Devin, so I have known you, God, I would say at least 15 years, if not more. I think we were introduced by Rob Aronson years ago. Hi, Rob. Thank you for that. And we know Jack Daly and Vern Harnish, a lot of other great people. You have done so many great things with your businesses and for other entrepreneurs. And I do have your bio, and you sent that to me. But frankly, I would much rather have you just kind of take us on the journey of how you became to be an entrepreneur, how you got that going, and then what happened from there. Take us along the journey. And I know it starts in college, right? Even maybe a little bit before with some of the things you were doing as a kid. But tell us about how that first business started, the highs and lows on that, and then the journey from there, please.
Sure. So I will start at 7 years old. People talk about lemonade stands. I was not one who ran a lemonade stand, but what I did, I sent away for stickers in the old days, and the digital natives that are listening will not remember the Exxon STP where they would give you stickers. And at 7, I would walk in the neighborhood and I would go door to door and sell stickers for 25 cents. But I learned to walk, knock, talk, and sell. And the old expression, learning to get doors shut on you, I learned at 7 years old. And I think they felt sorry for me because I had a runny nose and a stocking cap, and my jacket was too big. So that's where I started. But really, it was college. I played soccer in school, and I brought up a remnant for the dorm rooms. And my teammates said, where'd you get it from? So I brought up half a dozen and gave them to my buddies. Well, the next year, I knew that there was a market for it because so many people asked, where'd you get the carpet? So I went to a retail carpet store and I bought 114 rugs. Half of them I could pay for because I made $1,000. being a soccer coach and a waiter in the summer. And the other half, I was able to get on consignment because the owner knew who I was. I spent $29 for a U-Haul. And I actually, one of the smartest things I did was to get a license to sell on the campus, on the street. And in 6 hours, Dave, I sold out 114 rugs.
Wow.
I grossed $6,000 and I netted $3,000. So you don't have to be a mathlete to do the math. In 10 weeks, 2 jobs, I made $1,000. And in 6 hours, I made $3,000. That really started me with a successful business out of the gate. My senior year, I was doing this on 24 campuses. And when I graduated, my buddies were going to Wall Street and they said, Shane, you're going to be a carpet salesman? I said, no, I'm going to be in the college, I'm going to be in the college market. And over the next 12 years, we added linens and care packages, diploma frames, and a model, David. The university would give me their mailing list, their letterhead, and their signature. So it really was an affinity based mailing, and we had very high response rates. And that's where I learned to do good and do well, because we gave a revenue share back to the schools. And the schools would use the money for scholarships and programming. So that was my first business. And I sold it to a public company at 31 years old. And I really had a lot of bravado at that point because I had not experienced a difficult time. So I'll stop there. That was my first of many businesses. And I like to say I've started many for-profit companies. I've started a couple not-for-profit companies, C3s, that I'm really proud of. That will be my legacy. And I've got a couple no-profit companies, which is euphemism. They didn't work out so well.
Right,
So,
no profit. There's not for profit and there's no profit, right?
That's right.
But what a brilliant concept to go to the college and convince them to give you their mailing list and their letterhead and their logo, so it looks like it's coming from the college, and then in return you would do a revenue share with them. What a brilliant idea! And was that hard to convince them to do that in the beginning?
Well, it's a great question. There were really 2 benefits that the school would derive from this program. One is money, and the student groups really like the money, like the Residence Hall associations, but the administration really liked the service. They didn't care about the $5,000 or $10,000. And I learned a great lesson where I used to, when I would sign up schools, after I graduated, I would talk all about the money they could make and wouldn't spend as much time talking about the service. And instead of really understanding what the customer wanted, I was so excited about my own passion of having the schools make money and service. But you really have to, as Jack Daly would say, help people buy, help them with their problems and their issues, and you're going to be more successful. So I learned that early on. And another great quote, I like a lot of anecdotes, maxims, because I remember them. As a salesperson, there's a great saying, we are the master of everything we don't say and the slave of everything we do.
Wow. I haven't heard that one. That's huge. Yeah. I definitely talk a lot, so that's going to make me think about not talking so much. And you've done a lot with the education market since those days too. One of the things that I love that you're doing, tell us a little bit more about a company you have, and I believe it's a nonprofit called Shalom Learning.
Yes, thank you. So I'm Jewish, and we attend Hebrew school, which is after elementary school. You get bar mitzvah or bar mitzvah 7th grade. And it's a bad model because you're tired after school. The teachers are not very good because they only teach a couple hours a week. How good can you get? And the curriculum's not very good because it hasn't been packaged well. So there's a problem that I identified, that we have 19th century teaching as a medium. We have 20th century teachers and we have 21st century students. And the fact that the Generation Z students, or the digital natives, they learn online. That's their community. So I decided to start an online Hebrew school where we did three things. One, we created a digital platform instead of the students having to go and the parents drive them and waste a lot of time and they would miss their weekend activities. Second thing, we actually brought in world-class educators and created curriculum that's a lot more compelling, and we packaged it well. And then the third thing we did, we actually brought great teachers in and we did teacher training. So the combination of the three have now made the students more excited to learn. It's made the parents happier, and candidly, the synagogues that were losing students, we work with the synagogues in a similar manner that I did working with the universities, providing a worthwhile service for them.
Yeah, that's phenomenal. I'm remembering a conversation I had with a Jewish friend of mine, and Hebrew school, he dreaded it. He hated it, right? And it actually turned him off to the religion, and he's not that faithful now. He doesn't really do much with it. And he does attribute it to like his hatred of after school when all his other friends would go out and play football, whatever, and hang out in the neighborhood. He had to go to Hebrew school, and he just didn't like it, right? And it distanced him from the faith. And so you're finding an answer, right, to that problem, and which is what entrepreneurs do.
That's right. Now, I'm very passionate about philanthropy. We talk about for-profits. I like the term for purpose. Think about it, not for profit, such a negative connotation. And there's fundamentally only one difference between a for-profit and a for-purpose or a not-for-profit, and that's tax status. They should really be run the same way. So my two not-for-profits, one is Shalom Learning, which we're the largest Hebrew school in the world. We have over 6,000 students.
Wow.
Growing, so I'm really proud of that. And then I also have an organization called Scaling Up Social, which I took Vern Harnish's Scaling Up, which he operates in for-profits, and I took the same decisions, the four: talent, strategy, execution, cash, and applied it to the not-for-profit space. So I help not-for-profit organizations run more effectively, and they both have ROI. The difference that I say in for-profit, we talk about return on investment. In the not-for-profit, we talk about return on impact. And my impact with Shalom Learning, helping thousands of students become more engaged in something they were turned off to, and having parents have more flexibility and have their students more excited about participating on their time in a platform that they really build community, and that's online.
That's fantastic. So, Devin, I want to, really pick your brain with some of your experiences. I mean, over the past, I want to say 30 years since you've been an entrepreneur, right. You've had some great successes. You've had some failures, as you talked about, everywhere in between. Now that you know what you know, a lot of the Avanti listeners are beginning to middle stage entrepreneurs, right? If you're sitting down with one of them and they're starting, they've launched the dream, they're starting to make a little bit of revenue, but then logistics and anxiety and just the squirrel like syndrome, like all these different opportunities are popping up, and which one do I choose? If you were sitting down with some of our Avanti entrepreneurs and just giving them some advice on really how to take a deep breath and move forward, what are some of the things you would tell them?
Well, first of all, congratulations for the journey. I really think an entrepreneur is not for everyone. My son is not interested at all in being an entrepreneur. He's seen his dad with a lot of the ups and some of the downs. So there are two things that I think every entrepreneur should have. One is optimism. They really need to be optimistic, naturally. And the second is they need to be comfortable with discomfort and uncertainty. And I really believe you need both of those to be successful as an entrepreneur. So that's the first thing. The second suggestion that I would make is, you know, when you're an entrepreneur, I talk about Crossing the Chasm, which is a great book. You start where you're trying to figure out a going concern. If you're fortunate to jump that chasm, where now you have a going concern where you can make money with your business, there's something really important that I think helps you get there. One is, and I'm a huge proponent of testing. Make sure that you don't bet the farm, bet acres when you're trying something, because if you're wrong, you will have given up your opportunity to pivot. And if you're right, you can extrapolate. So I'm a big fan of testing. And the distinction I make between testing and piloting, testing, if you're involved in a digital business with empirical data, you can know that something works. You can do an A/B split, you can do a multivariate, and really understand statistical relevance if it works or if it doesn't. If you're in an offline business, it's hard to isolate a variable. I call it a pilot. And a pilot is more directionally, you see if something works or if it doesn't, but you don't know with that same level of certainty. So that's the second suggestion. I also talk about, and I learned this from Colin Powell about 15 years ago. He spoke about decision-making. Decision-making is very important for anyone, but especially an entrepreneur. So Colin Powell called it the 40-70 rule. And he said, as it relates to decision-making, if you have less information than 40%, it's probably too early. If you have more information than 70%, probably too late.
Oh, wow.
It's in that 40 to 70% range where you want to use a good gut decision. So I like to tell my team when they have a difficult decision, bring it to me when you're at 65%. Right. And I can make a better decision for you. So that's another recommendation that I would make. And the last point that I would say, and people ask, what defines an entrepreneur? And you hear risk taker, and you hear other things, not very smart, guy who doesn't, or woman who doesn't have a job. There are a lot of ways to answer it. Yeah. But you also, I get asked, what defines a startup versus a going concern? And most people would answer it when you actually not only generate revenue, but when you are self-sufficient as a business, you don't need additional investment. That's one definition. But the definition that I give in addition to that is when you can say no more than you say yes, you've arrived as an organization.
Yeah. Yeah. That's Warren Buffett, right? Right. He says no 99 out of 100 times, right? And
because he can. Because you're an entrepreneur and you're in a startup, you're trying to make anything and everything work. And you're pivoting and you're changing. But when you get something to work, that's when you should say no more than yes. And then another one of my favorite lines is nail it, then scale it.
Oh, I like that.
And a couple other last points. I said last one, but I could go on and on. In this
last one.
When you're in a startup, I encourage you to work on partnerships, because that's a cost-effective way to see if the dogs are eating the dog food. You want to make sure that there's a market there. And partnerships can be a great way to jumpstart your startup. And I like to say with partnerships move at the speed of trust. The more trust you have in a partnership, the faster you can move. And speed's important, but also patience is important for a startup. But the anecdote that I like to use for not just startups, and I use this all the time when I have partnerships, I don't spend a lot of time documenting the partnership. I want to make sure there's a train to rob before we divvy up all the loot. So spend the time making sure that there's a market before trying to decide who makes what. So I'll stop there on some recommendations related going from startup to going concern.
Well, I always have a title for the podcast, for this interview. And I'm going to name it Partnerships Move at the Speed of Trust. Right? Is that what you said?
That is what I said.
I love that. That could be your next book. That's a really good one. That's a really good one.
So by the way, David, I'm a big fan of list of threes. If I have 9 things, I divide by 3. If I have 1 thing, I multiply it by 3. People remember threes. And there are 3 aspects about my axioms, maxims, anecdotes, Devinisms, as my different teams like to call them.
Uh-huh.
A number of these I read and I borrow. Some of them I enhance, and a number of them I make up as well. But if you quote any of them, you can, any that are just mine, please just footnote me once, and then it's yours for life.
Right.
You can take credit for it.
Yeah. No, I will definitely give the credit, right? I will definitely give the credit. Well, and and I want to go back to one of the last things you said too was nail it and then scale it. And I think it was Jim Collins. It might have been Vern Harnish said that companies are newer companies especially are more likely to die from indigestion of too many opportunities than starvation of not enough, right? And I think because the entrepreneurial spirit, we're excited. We want to say yes. We're pleasers. We love the new idea every day, right? All of a sudden, we're working on 20 things instead of the one thing that we should nail and scale. So I think it's really, really important point that you bring out. So thank you for that.
A saying related to that for entrepreneurs that want to be successful, and success can be financially making a difference. But to that point, David, we build wealth by being concentrated. We keep it by being diversified.
Wow. Is that another Devinism?
It's another Devinism that I think I borrowed from Warren Buffett or somebody a lot smarter than me in the financial markets. But people use that in the financial market. I actually apply it to the entrepreneur and the business market.
Yep, that's awesome. I love it. So one of the things, Devin, that you have been graceful about is even though you overall, over the whole roller coaster that you've been on, overall, you are really successful, really well respected, done a lot of incredible things. You've been very loving and giving and kind and helpful along the way. But you share that, you and it's really a lot of entrepreneurs. It's a mental struggle, right? We have ups and downs. Some days we're manically happy, and then there's periods of what could be a dark depression and anxiety, and everywhere in between. Maybe you could tell me a little bit about that, and maybe some, when we do feel, us going to an anxious, dark place, some things that we could do to either, stop the descend there, or if we are there, how to get back out,
Sure. So I have no problem talking about depression. It's a disease. It's not a character flaw. And I think that's really important for people to understand. And I have had bouts of depression over the years. It rears its ugly head every 5 to 10 years. And normally it's a function of 3 things that cause depression. The first is biochemical. My mother had it, my grandfather had it. So it's in the family, as they like to say. The second is psychological. People that experience depression, they have psychological issues. Fortunately, that has not been what has contributed to my depression over the years. But it's the third one, candidly, that most entrepreneurs cause depression, and that's situational. And a lot of it's a function of their business is not going as well as they expected, or it's going so poorly that they can't figure a way out. That's real, especially when you have a family and you're trying to figure out not only to keep your employees funded, but how to take care of your family and yourself. So there is an over-index for entrepreneurs and depression. But depression, the technical or the definition, it's a warped sense of reality. Normally, it's not as bad as you think, but a lot of brilliant people like Abraham Lincoln and Clinton, and you can go down the line, experience depression. It's something that is becoming much more accepted. Mental health. And 1 out of 3 students going to college experience some level of anxiety, depression, or some behavioral health. And we're really doing a great job. There's an organization that is on about 700 campuses that addresses behavioral health. It's really getting rid of the stigma because it's not a character flaw, it's a disease.
Yep. Well, and I think we got to remember that it is a phase, and you could, you will get through it, right? What's the saying? This too shall pass. Another guy that had depression was Winston Churchill, right? And his phrase was, when you're going through hell, don't stop. Right. You'll get through it. Keep on walking. So thanks for sharing that. And I know it's a very, very, especially with entrepreneurs, we probably tend to be a little bit more volatile to begin with. That's why we're entrepreneurs. We want to experience life to the fullest. And that does mean often the highs and the lows, right? So thank you for that.
Dave, let me just add an interesting point. So I've been fortunate to be a member of YPO for the last 20 years. And I created a behavioral health group when 5 years ago, my last bout, I was experiencing depression. It was a function of my mom had passed away, and I had really my first significant learning experience. That's when a business didn't work out. And that really contributed to a tough time for me. So with YPO, there are 3 types of CEOs. There's the entrepreneur, which we are. There's the hired gun, which corporations bring in a CEO, and then there's the family CEO. And there were about 100 people roughly that joined this organization that I started, this club, in the first week. And ironically, I thought there were 75 entrepreneurs. There were 20 family CEOs, and there were only 5 hired guns. And I didn't understand why. And then I asked one of the 5, I said, why do you think there are so few? And he said, Devin, as an entrepreneur, you control your business. You can tell your team and your board, and you're going to still be employed. As a family CEO, the family's going to stay behind you. But a hired gun doesn't have the same soft landing or safety net. Yeah. And that's why people, and you don't have to be an entrepreneur listening to this program, if you're an employee, you may feel that your employer won't understand, but I really feel strongly that they will understand more than you think, and it's becoming well accepted.
Yeah. Once again, thank you for that. I appreciate it. So Devin, before we go, and certainly love talking to you, and I'm excited to spend more time with you. But for our listeners here, what's next? What is next for Devin Schain? What are you working on now? What's going to be the next big thing in your world?
Thanks. Well, not that should surprise you. I always like to work on 3 things.
Right.
And the first, I'm executive chairman of a company, T-Works. We're in the DoD technology space, and I'm executive chairman, and we're in the process of selling that business. So I'm real excited about a exit with T-Works. The second thing that I'm working on is Shalom Learning and continuing to grow that with the success we're having. I am chair of the board now. I was founder 8 years ago, and I was a member of the board, but this year I stepped up as chair of Shalom Learning, and then I'm back to being a CEO. I've recently started, it's called Student Playbook. And the reason why I started this, I have a senior in high school, I have a freshman in college who plays lacrosse at the University of Pennsylvania. They have great friends, but they lack the life skills that are so important to success, such as time management and communication and financial literacy. And we can go on and on. So we've decided to create the student playbook using my old model, my old playbook, if you will, having the university's letterhead mailing list, and we'll offer this to students with modules that the students can take over the summer to hopefully make their transition to college more successful, both in and out of the classroom. And not only will we have worthwhile content with assessments and podcasts, but we're also offering coaches. I'm a big fan of coaches and mentoring. So we're offering that for freshmen, and we're offering it for seniors in college as they transition either to their first job or grad school, teaching them about networking, about financial literacy, how to really optimize when you are in your first job, and some of the things, some of the best practices as well. So I like to compare sports teams to most businesses. We say that sports teams perform better than most businesses for 3 reasons. And we call it the 3 Ps. The first, they have a professional coach. The second, they practice. And the third, they have a playbook. So we're taking that same analog to students, and we're providing an opportunity for them to have coaches, for them to have best practices as they practice, and the ability to create a personalized playbook. We think they'll be more successful in preparation from that transition from high school to college, and then from college to the first job. So that's my latest. It's called Student Playbook. You can look it up and see what it's about and watch the video. And we're in our first year, our first season.
Yeah, I watched the video this morning. It's super, super fantastic. I love the concept. And as you know, my previous business was I was in the education world myself, and you maybe miss it a little bit. So we might have to talk. Maybe, if they get the job or go to grad school after college, or God forbid they become an entrepreneur, maybe we can help them with that too, right?
That would be great.
Hey, Devin, and you know what? I have to say one thing. In the beginning of the interview, I talked about how we met, and I thought it was Rob Aronson. And Rob did get us together for a couple of meetings, so thank you, Rob. But I remembered, and I would do a big disservice, it was Julie Kaplan that introduced us. She used to work for you. She's here in Rochester now. So I want to thank Julie for that incredible introduction and really a great friendship over the years. Thank you so much, Julie. And Devin, thank you for all that you're doing. And not only doing it, quietly, a lot of entrepreneurs will have their business, make some money, but you've done that, but you're sharing and you're helping in many different ways. So thank you so much for what you're doing, and thank you for being on podcast today. Really appreciate it.
My pleasure. And if any of your listeners want to reach out, happy to take an email from them. Just put in the subject line, David Podcast Supporter. And I will absolutely respond. They can try me at devin@studentplaybook.com.
Awesome. Devin, thank you so much. Appreciate your time again, and wishing you massive continued success.
My pleasure.
Yeah. And thank you, Avanti family, for listening. So appreciate your time as well. Please go to AvantiEntrepreneur.com. We have all sorts of things there, over 150 podcasts, lots of content, info about our events, etc. AvantiEntrepreneur.com. And you can always email Devin if you want a personal introduction from me. I'd be happy to do that as well. David@davidmamano.com. Devin, thanks again. Avanti, thank you, everybody. Make sure to check us out. Like I said, AvantiEntrepreneur.com. Make it a great day and stay awesome.